So again, we're going to spend most of our time talking about the thought exchange, and we're going to talk about some of the key thoughts that came up during the week and a half or so that we were collecting information on and thoughts. We're going to talk about some of the, the top 3 rated thoughts by parents. We're going to talk about the themes that emerged as we looked at the thought exchange. And then we're also going to talk about those areas where there's really discrepant results, where there's one group that says it should be this way and another group that says it should be that way. At the end, we're going to spend some time taking some questions and addressing some comments that show up either on the YouTube feed or on the Facebook feed. We'll do our best to answer those sort of frequently asked questions, knowing that we're going to avoid the questions that are sort of specific to a person or a situation. And we also want to acknowledge right away that we aren't going to be able to answer all of those questions that show up. So on the thought exchange, I want to talk with you about a little bit about the participation, what it looked like. We had 284 participants, about 400, and those 284 participants shared a total of 456 thoughts, and those thoughts were rated about 18,000 times. So a lot of engagement around the thoughts that were shared. When we look at the breakdown of who participated in the survey, we see that not a whole lot of student participation, about 1%. A lot of parent participation with a little bit more than 80. And then a lot of staff participation, let's see, that's right around 17% of the participant, and one administrator chimed in. This is the program that most families demonstrated that they participated in. Shows me that we got a little bit of work to do, making sure that we're getting equal representation from our English learner community and our students living in poverty. Most of our students that responded our parents that responded had students in the general education program, about 7% with IEPs, and then some other very small percentage points. So this is one of the things that Thought Exchange does for us, is it gives us a word cloud. And these are the words that showed up the most as we went through the Thought Exchange. So a lot of talk about families, about testing, about gatherings, particularly around holidays, lots of thinking about our staff, and then a bunch of other key important words that came through, including masks and being good models, and learning shows up in a couple of different ways. So let's dive right into some of our key thoughts here. So I'm going to ask our different team members to participate on these questions. And so the first one I'm going to throw out to Amy, and this is the thought, that really breaks our hearts, and it's a true statement. And it is that our high school students need more attention. Depression, suicide attempts, and substance abuse are climbing at an alarming rate. We need to engage them on a more regular basis to help them with the mental aspects of how this is affecting our students. So Amy, what are your thoughts on that important thought?
I just think it says so much about our community, Superintendent Koska, that we're seeing this coming to the forefront right out the gate. You know, it really is reflective of our values and the concerns that we have for our students. And I would say it's not just high school students. I think this is a time where we really need to be mindful about the well-being and mental health of all of our students, all the way down to the TK students. But we have a really robust plan in place to make sure that we're addressing this. At the high school level, at Novato High School, we have a great place we call the East Annex, and that has a lot of resources for students. And students can self-refer, or a staff member can reach out and let the annex know that they have some concerns. And at that point, we'll connect those students to all of our mental health resources and make sure they have what they need. At San Marin, we have a great team of counseling staff and a school psychologist who really is taking one of the leads here in Marin, along with Novato High School, to develop a smart, strategic suicide prevention protocol. And those are robust and in place for our students. When we see a student who doesn't attend class or is absent or has some behaviors that are concerning, we reach out. We reach out with our community liaisons. We reach out with our restorative justice team. We have a social worker that also reaches out, but we as a school community really want to make sure that we're connecting with those students and we're digging beneath the absence to make sure that this is a child that is in good mental health and isn't in need of some of the other offerings that we have. We also have partnerships. Every year I lead the LCAP committee, and our LCAP committee is always very adamant about allocating resources for mental wellness. So we partner with North Marine Community Services and Bay Area Community Resources, and they are from the first week in March when we went remote. They've been providing therapy and support for our students. We also have our staff, they get trained on some applications to help them identify some of these warning signs that might indicate that a student isn't well. If you go to our Nevada Unified webpage, our wellness webpage, there's a whole bunch of resources for our community. And if you have a student or know of a student who might be struggling with alcohol, drugs, or tobacco, you can reach out to us. We are in contact with resources that can help that way. And all of our teachers, grades K through 12, take the time throughout the day to make sure that we're talking about those social and emotional learning principles, to make sure that we have students that are adapting well to this environment and taking care of themselves. And I have to say, this is one of the big drivers for why we're really excited to return. We know that getting eyes on these students is going to be our best way to really check in with them and make sure that they know that they're loved and that we can offer any resources they might have. So appreciate the question.
Good, thank you. Thank you, Amy. The next thought is about teacher satisfaction and comfort. And this is, I want to ensure that teachers feel safe and supported in their roles. Everybody that lives in our community, works in our community, knows that there have been some challenges between the district and our Teachers Association as we've navigated this return to school. While we have our differences, we have lots of things that we agree on. We as a district have done our best to make sure that everything that we do when it comes to returning to school meets or exceeds the guidelines put in place by all of our different public health agencies, whether it be federal, state, or local. And then that we go beyond that. That's been our commitment from the beginning, was that we can only bring our kids back when we're convinced that we can do it safely, when we're able to convince our public health partners that we're able to do it safely. We've generated all of our school safety plans. Those have all been submitted to public health and approved. So we're sure that our teachers are in a safe environment. I want to acknowledge that they don't feel, there are a group of teachers that don't feel as supported as they would like by the district, and that doesn't make me feel good. I want to continue to work on that relationship and making sure that they're feeling more supported, and we continue on that important journey. The next question is again about safety, adequate ventilation, proper PPE, guidelines and protocols around COVID when somebody gets sick, keeping everyone safe and healthy so we do not contribute to community spread. So this is what we've been working towards since we sent kids home. How do we make sure that we're safe? Yancy, why don't we break that down? Let's start with adequate ventilation and proper PPE. What can you share with us about that?
Thank you, Superintendent Koska. Absolutely. We'll take it kind of one point at a time. The first around ventilation, we've worked within the CDC guidelines and the AHRAE standards, the first of which is maximizing fresh air in the classroom. That can be as simple as keeping the door and windows open when possible. It also has to do with adjusting our HVAC system. The first thing meaning that they're in proper repair, but also adjusting it to settings that maximize fresh air. And then also understanding that there's times, when it gets really cold or really warm, that potentially we won't be able to do all those things. And so that has to do with increasing filtration in our sites with newer HVAC. units. That means upgrading those to the MERV 13 filters, and in sites with some of our older HVAC where they can't take those higher filters, adding an air purifier with a HEPA filter in all of those classes. So it's kind of a multi-part plan, but really focusing on CDC's guidelines around proper ventilation.
Okay, good. So thank you for that. So that's adequate ventilation. What about proper PPE? Where are we with PPE in the classrooms and on school campuses?
So all of our classrooms and other spaces have been provided with a PPE supply kit that are stocked regularly by our custodial staff. That includes masks, that's kids masks, adult masks, permanent masks, reusable, and it involves face shields, sanitizer, disinfectant, additional paper towels, and alcohol wipes at our secondary sites. So every individual classroom and space, like the office or other library, et cetera, have the PPE supply kits.
Okay, wonderful. And so pretty much all the PPE that you would typically need in a given day, week, is in that kit. And if they know that that it should be getting checked and refilled, if they're ever running low on something, they let the custodian or office staff know so that can get refilled. And we have supplies for when those need to be refilled. We have more in the warehouse.
Correct. We have several months, at least 3 or 4 months of COVID supplies, but we continue to work with our partners at the state and the county, and also continuing to purchase on our own to supplement those supplies for all of our staff and students.
Okay, great. Thank you, Yancey. I think we'll talk to the last part about it on one of these other thoughts, which is this idea that we got to keep everybody safe and healthy so that we don't contribute to community spread. So that would be kind of thinking about what happens in the event that somebody does get sick. So we'll circle back to that in a few minutes. So these were the key thoughts. The first 3 things were the key thoughts, the thoughts that got the most traction, that were ranked the highest out of all of the thoughts. These are the themes that emerged as we went through the thought exchange, as generated by thought exchange. Some questions about COVID test return, about holiday gatherings, about supporting our staff, about hybrid model learning time, about safety, about classrooms and cohorts, and just general learning. We're going to talk about a few of these key themes now. So the first one, and this is where we get to lean on Marcia and Sandra a little bit, some questions about cohort test return. So question 1, if a household member tests positive, will you require the student to receive a negative test before they return to school? To stop the spread, the exposed student will need to be a confirmed non-carrier. So I think the question there is, if a household member tests positive, will you require the student to receive a negative test before they come back to school? My understanding is that if a household member of a student tests positive for COVID, that student and their siblings that attend school would need to quarantine for 14 days. And upon completion of their quarantine, then they would be able to return to school. Of course, we could always encourage them to get a test. Marcia and Sandra, did I get that one right? Anything to add?
That was exactly right, what you said.
Okay, good. Well, I'm 1 for 1. That's a good thing. Okay, next question. How will the district or school manage parents who send kids to school sick because they need to work or they need childcare? And, this is important because, we're during a pandemic and the flu season. And then there's a couple more questions. So let's answer the first one first. So that question is, how will the district or school manage parents who send kids to school sick because they need to work or they need childcare. So we all play a role in how we manage this pandemic. We all play a role in keeping our community safe. And each day we're asking all of the parents of children who have returned to answer 2 questions. They get an email in the morning from Crisis Go. They've got to answer a couple questions. One is essentially, is your child healthy? Do they have any symptoms consistent with COVID? The other is, have they been exposed to anybody who has tested positive for COVID? So that's our first step, is that we're going to trust that our families are going to answer those questions and answer them honestly, that they're going to keep kids home when they're sick. We acknowledge that's not probably going to be followed 100%. In those cases, when we have students that show up and have symptoms of COVID, we're going to be reaching out to those families and talking with them about it. We acknowledge that some folks, like me, have seasonal allergies. This is an allergy season for some of us. But if that's the case and a child is coming to school and they have the sniffles, we're going to ask the parent to get a doctor's note for that child. When we see children that are demonstrating symptoms, we're going to, potentially take their temperature in the office. We're going to reach out to the home and we're going to have a conversation with them about their child. And then there's a different protocol that we have for when students are demonstrating symptoms. Martha or Sandra, would either of you like to talk about what happens when we have kids at school that are demonstrating symptoms, or would you like me to tackle that one?
You're muted, Marcia.
I was just suggesting you go ahead.
I am happy to do that. So
We'll help.
Yeah. So when we have children that are demonstrating symptoms, what we're going to do is we're going to reach out to the parents and we're going to say, hey, you need to come and you need to pick up your child. You need to figure out what's going on that's causing the symptoms. So if you believe that it's allergies, you're going to need to take them to the doctor and get a note from your doctor that says that they're suffering from seasonal allergies. And once we have that note, then they're able to return. If they have symptoms that we do not get a note from a doctor, then we're going to have them stay home for 10 days, or they're going to have to return with a negative test for COVID. So those are the 3 different pathways back. If you have a child who has symptoms, the first is to get a doctor's note that says, no, this isn't COVID, this is some other sort of seasonal situation. Or B, you get a negative test that demonstrates that the child is COVID-free. Or C, the child stays home for 10 days and then is able to return. All right, anybody have anything to add on that one?
That was
Superintendent Koska, I would note that this is a great item that's in the student and family handbook for COVID-19 safety, which the County of Marin, the Public Health, thank you, got it right in front of you. So that's at the end of page 1. So that's definitely something that every family should be reviewing as parents and with their kids as necessary.
Great. Thank you, Yancy. Okay, there's a couple more questions in there. Will families be required to test negative? I kind of touched on that. And will families be required to get flu shots before returning to hybrid? The school has the ability to mandate certain vaccinations prior to allowing kids on campus, but the flu vaccine is not one of them. So we cannot require that families get the flu vaccine or students get the flu vaccine before they come onto campus. We're certainly doing our best to encourage that, and we'll continue to do so, but we cannot require that by law. Okay, so what's the procedure if there is a COVID case in a cohort? Will students need to have a negative test in order to return to the classroom after the 2-week quarantine? So the answer to that is, again, no. Once in the event that we have a positive case within a student's cohort, that cohort will be shifted back to remote learning, and there will need to be a 2-week quarantine period. At the end of that 2-week quarantine period, then the cohort will be able to come back together. Anybody who experiences symptoms during that quarantine time would need to go through the protocol for somebody with symptoms. So that's an important part of that. All right, lots of questions and concerns, reasonably, understandably, about holiday gatherings and the timing of our return. You know, and one of the big ones is that grades 7, 8, 9, and 10 are returning right after our winter break, and grades, make sure I get this right, 4, 5, and 6 are returning right after our Thanksgiving break. So, you know, there are some concerns that it feels like it's a risky time based on our inability to control adult and family behavior over the breaks. Those are natural times for people to be gathering. You know, the reality is, as we looked at return dates and times, there is no good return date and time when you look at the calendar. You know, we looked at, you know, if we bring people back, you know, at the end of the day, we had to pick some dates, and we have to trust and believe in our community, that our community is going to do the right things for our families, that they're going to take this pandemic seriously. We have demonstrated in Marin County that we are taking things seriously. We have moved from the purple tier, which is the tier, the highest level of concern tier, into the red tier. It is anticipated that we will move into the orange tier tomorrow, meaning that the spread is really, it's still in our county, but it's not spreading dramatically within our county. So, you know, we've gotten to that point because the people of Marin County and Novato have done a good job of following these rules. We're going to anticipate and trust in our community that they're going to continue to do so. And again, when we looked at the calendar, if we wanted to get our students back on campus, which has been my commitment from the beginning of this, when we could do it safely, there was simply not a good time to be able to do it. And I agree, you know, with thought 2 here, I sure wish folks weren't talking about holiday travel and gatherings so casually. We're not supposed to be doing those things. We can't open schools and everything else fully and safely until people truly get that. We're in a pandemic, and we do need folks to be taking this seriously. And, you know, we all hear horror stories of, you know, the family who did a good job of quarantining. They got surprised by some friends that popped in to celebrate something, or some other relatives to celebrate something, and next thing you know, you have a big family outbreak. We can't let our guard down on this one. We've got to take it seriously and continue to take it seriously.
Chris?
Amy, I want you to touch on some of these in the next thought. So I've talked a lot about the return dates and coming back before the holidays, but let's talk a little bit about the in-person instruction, about the conferences before the Thanksgiving break, and sort of the pattern of school between now and winter break.
Because I think Sandra or Marcia also had a comment on your last.
Please, good.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to comment about the holiday travel and gatherings. I think we have seen that people have pandemic fatigue, people are lonely, people are wanting to, you know, it's the holidays. Mm-hmm. And I think we have to be prepared to know that there will be some of that. We continue to see that in the community, and we need to continue to strongly message, as you just did. You know, if we could all listen to that Superintendent Koska every morning, I think, you know, would help so much. But there are also sports activities out of state that we're aware that kids are attending. So we do have to continue to be vigilant. And I just am reinforcing that there's a reality to human behavior here that we will see, for sure.
Thank you for that. And some of that's just, you know, human nature, right?
Right.
Yeah. And I know we're all lonely. I know we're all missing our routines and missing our family and all that stuff. Amy, a little bit about our school hours between now and winter break.
Yep, so this is making a good point. On the original calendar, we did have the week right before Thanksgiving as minimum days for those parent-teacher conferences. Our educators would really prefer the time to get to know the student, to take the time during the November and December months to really assess their skill levels. And so we have the calendar committee meeting, I believe, today, and they're going to look at a more appropriate week in February so that we're able to have those parent-teacher conferences after our teachers have had the time to get to know the child in person a little bit, collect a little more data, make sure that we have an accurate sense of where that child is. So that second week of learning right before Thanksgiving break will continue to be regular class sessions.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. Okay, let's look at the next slide here. So we're some questions about staff, and I think we'll turn this next one over to Yancey. Yancey, what are the health screening requirements in place for our staff?
Thank you. So all staff will be required to do a daily health screening as they enter the campus as part of their employee tracking of contacts. As they come onto campus, they answer a question very similar to what our students are asked and their parents. Number one, do you have any symptoms of COVID? Number two, have you been in contact with anybody who has tested positive for COVID? Those also relate to any visitor to campus as well, even if that's just coming into the office. So all staff daily are required to answer those questions. And if they answer no to obviously either of those, an email is immediately sent to the site administrator for action.
Okay, so that's the daily health screening. What about COVID testing? Is there a requirement for staff or recommendation for staff? How does that work? We highly recommend all of our staff. We've partnered with the County of Marin to provide testing every Tuesday. That's available for our community, but very specifically our staff at Novato High School. It is recommended that teachers and other staff are tested at least every 2 months. And so we have a recommended schedule for each site that recommends when each of the staff will go in for testing. And staff is allowed to go to that. We are also working on a partnership with another company to provide additional staff testing. So sounds like your schedule is something like 25% of the staff every 2 weeks. You give them a kind of a window and say, we strongly encourage you to go during this time. And then so some of the testing sites we have available to staff and community, we have the testing site every Tuesday, at Novato High School?
Correct.
Okay, and then we got Marin Community Clinic.
Correct.
And then you could go to the San Rafael testing site at the Civic Center.
Correct.
And then we're working on another testing site for our staff to kind of be able to speed that up for our staff and make it easier for them.
We also have our agreements with our healthcare providers that through Kaiser that there is free testing for all of our staff with the healthcare in the district as well.
Okay, great. Good. Okay, thank you. Next thought. My first thought is about safety for students and staff and returning to campus. Health is the most important thing for all of us. Will the campuses consistently keep the highest level of cleanliness and have the proper PPE for all staff? So we've talked a lot about PPE for all staff. So we know that all of the common spaces, classrooms have their own bin. In the bin, we've got the masks, disposable masks, cloth masks, face shields, wipes, spray, cleaner, paper towels, gloves. I'm sure I'm missing them, but so those are readily supplied and stocked. What about cleanliness of our classrooms? I saw, hey, I got a question. I was out at one of the schools, one of the kindergartens. They went out to lunch break, and I saw one of the custodians come in with some machine to do something. Can you talk to us about what that might have been?
Yeah, I'm assuming
like a Ghostbusters thing.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I think the kids are going to be really excited, especially our younger ones. It's an electrostatic sprayer for disinfectant, and it's a way to very quickly disinfect high-touch areas, including door handles, desks, etc. So no, they are pretty exciting, especially in the operations world.
Yancy, is that daily that's happening?
Yes.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
On that, I wanted to, like Superintendent Koska noted, we already talked about some of the PPE, but around some of the custodial changes that we've made since March are enhanced cleaning protocols around sanitization and disinfecting. Also increased custodial budgets at all of our sites. We've added 3 new positions to ensure that all high-touch areas are sanitized and disinfected daily, as well as high-use areas such as bathrooms multiple times a day. We bought new equipment, as Superintendent Koska noted about the Ghostbuster guns, and enhanced training throughout the district that will continue as we get changing guidance from either our federal, state, or local health partners.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. The next thought, and this is one we certainly agree with, it is not fair to put teachers and staff in potentially unsafe environments because remote learning is better than the risk of losing even one teacher or staff member. And so this is why we've gone to such great extremes to make sure that we do everything we can to mitigate risk in our classrooms and in our schools. And that starts before people get on campus with cleaning. People come on campus, everybody must complete some sort of health screener, whether it's an adult or a child. We've really limited the access of adults, of our parents and volunteers onto campus. As I saw parents dropping their kindergartners off today, it was both hard and rewarding to see them following the procedures and dropping them off out at the curb or the safe place at the school. Once we're on campuses, we've done a lot of work to make sure that we have multiple different layers to our ventilation plan. In classrooms, we made sure that students are 6 feet apart, if at all possible. On very, very rare occasions, they're 5.5 feet apart. Each student's desk has a divider or has access to a divider to keep those germs in that area. We've talked about the new cleaning procedures. We've talked about the PPE that we have in place. We're requiring all people on campus to wear masks at all times. So we've really gone to great lengths to make sure that our schools are safe places, as safe a places as they can be for our students. Sandra or Marcia, do you have any access to any of the data about schools that have been open in Marin County or programs that have been open in Marin County and any infections that have occurred on those campuses or in those programs?
We have a dashboard on the county website. I think it may be also on the MCOE website. And it keeps track of how many cases there have been in schools, how many cohorts are open, how many I forget, there's some measure there of how much school has taken place and how many infections have occurred. Mm-hmm. And you can see that there's a very high number of hours, student hours, and a relatively low number of infections right now. This dashboard refers to the period, I think, starting in early September when a lot of programs opened. And right now, it hasn't actually been updated this week, but I think we're up to a total of 6 COVID positive students in different schools around the county since the beginning of September, and no COVID positive staff members.
Okay. And in talking to Dr. Willis, it's my understanding that one of those student cases was a confirmed student-to-student case in a program, and that was in one of the 3-year-old programs with no masks and no social distancing, is my understanding. I'm not sure.
Oh, right. The dashboard actually refers to K-12 schools.
Oh, okay. Got it.
We do have a handful of cases in preschools, and particularly in family daycares, where they care for infants and toddlers that can't mask and require a lot of hands-on care. We have had some cases of child-to-child transmission or child-to-adult in those kind of settings. But in schools where
much
people...
more intimate settings.
Right, exactly. But in K-12 schools, so far since the beginning of September, we've had 6 cases total in the county.
Okay, good.
And none of those have involved child-to-adult or child-to-child transmission.
Oh, that's great. Okay. And 6 is still more than we'd like, but...
Sure, of course.
Glad that it sounds like the protocols that have been in place have been helping. All right, so these next 3 are the highest ranked thoughts from parents, and this is one we've talked a lot about, and appreciate Dr. Carter letting us know her thoughts on this and all the things we're doing to focus on the mental health needs of our children. And so this is an ongoing priority. This is something that we tried to increase our support with through Measure A, and unfortunately we didn't get enough votes to expand these services. But we continue to do the best we can with our resources available to make sure that we are providing mental health supports on all of our campuses. So we'll see that one again. Actually, it's such an important topic. It comes up time and time again as we go through this analysis. So this one I'm going to let Dr. Carter talk to again. What is the cohort size going to be for middle school, and are classes going to be outside?
So from TK to 12, we are encouraging our educators to use the outside classrooms as much as possible. So that's strongly encouraged. We feel like that's a best practice. And if you come visit our elementary sites, you'll see that a lot of them have already kind of designated those spaces for instruction that allows them to be outside in the fresh air. The cohort size for middle school, you basically take the regular schedule for a child and split that in half. So within every classroom, there will be about 12 to 15 students. And then, of course, middle schoolers are taking 16 courses. So right now, we're still refining the bell schedule. And so we're looking at about 45 students each day for a middle school student.
And so that's through some, this has been a point of concern in our community with our teachers, with our administrators. Sounds like there's been some good work done behind the scenes to figure out how to minimize the number of daily contacts and cohorts that our students are participating in. Does that seem accurate?
Yep, and there's still a lot of great ideas that they're exploring about how they can make sure to continue that in their bell schedule to come.
And we've got a few weeks yet to continue to iron the wrinkles out of that plan. So appreciate all the people that are giving good thoughts to help make that better. That's always our goal, is to continue to get better each and every day. What are some of the things that NFT and NUSD disagree on? It would be helpful to have more transparency instead of one group blaming the other. Yeah, this is a hard one. We really try to keep what happens in negotiations confidential in negotiations. I know there's been a lot of information out there in the public about what's happened and what we've agreed on and what we've disagreed on. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about a couple of things that we disagree on at the table with our teachers union. So I think one of the big ones is returning students to campus. When we last got a proposal from the Novato Federation of Teachers in October, they had their proposal was for our high school students saving some small groups not being able to return to campus during the 2021 school year. So the vast majority of our high school students would not be on campus for the whole 2020-2021 school year. And that's something that we clearly have a significant disagreement on. The other one pertains to compensation. We came to a tentative agreement between the district and the Nevada Federation of Teachers that had some compensation for teachers in our secondary programs, our 6 through 12 programs, who are teaching classes that had a mix of students in the flexible in-person learning program and the virtual learning academy program. And in our tentative agreement that unfortunately the teachers voted down, which is within their rights to do, and we understand, we agreed that teachers who were in that situation would receive $750 per semester, acknowledging that that was additional work and it's hard and it's going to take extra time. And we tentatively agreed that that's how we were going to compensate teachers for that extra work. In the proposal that we received from the teachers following the tentative agreement, they asked for a 5-fold increase in that cost. So rather than being $750 per teacher per semester, they wanted a teacher who was teaching 5 different sections or 5 different classes with students in flexible in-person and the virtual learning academy to get paid $3,750. And that was something that we felt like we simply couldn't afford to do and be fiscally responsible in doing so. And so those were a couple of the key areas. There are other areas that we had some differences of opinion on. One of the things that we've learned through this process over the last month or so is that as a district, we need to do a better job of communicating where we are with in negotiations. And we will be doing so moving forward in the interest of transparency as shared by the parents having an interest in that. So I'd say those are 2 of the biggest areas where we have disagreement. Okay, so this is the third section of the slides that we're going to look at. This is the areas where there's sort of 2 significant camps, where one camp believes one thing and one camp believes the opposite. And so you got side A. In this case, side A is saying that it's too soon to return to in-person learning. The United States is experiencing a significant spike in COVID-19. Given this development, it's too soon to return to in-person learning. And then on the other side, we need to stay home. We need to stay virtual. I'm sorry, on the same side, we need to stay home. We need to stay in the virtual world. We need consistency. We need to avoid the possibility of shutting down again. On the opposite side, we have folks saying we need to get back to school and we need to follow the science. So an example, based on our COVID stats, guidance from Marin County and the state of California, it says that our schools can be open now for 100% in person. It's disappointing that all the negotiations are causing such a delay in reopening. I do want to say that I believe the first part. The second part, really the negotiations are not what's slowing down the return. I just want to be really candid about that. We've not felt like we were prepared until now to return, and that's what's been slowing down the return. We wanted to make sure we only get one chance at this. We're committed to making sure that we get it right. The other statement, for all those who don't want to return to in-person, there is a place for those students. It's called the Virtual Learning Academy. And at this time, based on the science and our numbers in Marin County, there is no reason those students who choose to be in-person learning should still be at home. I do want to say we continue to have the Virtual Learning Academy. It's a large program. It's got about 15% of our students in the district, TK-12, enrolled in it. We do continue to have spaces opening up in those programs as we're having a lot of people transfer from the flexible in-person learning program into the Virtual Learning Academy. If you are interested in the Virtual Learning Academy, you can look back at some of my most recent emails to you that have Jennifer Casper's email in them. Her email address is jcasper, like the friendly ghost, jcasper@nusd.org. And she will let you know if we'd be able to immediately move your child into the VLA or if we continue to have a waiting list, as we do for just a couple of grades out of our 13 grade levels that the VLA covers. That is an option for people who feel like it's not the right time to transition their kids back to on-campus learning.
And Dr. Koska, I do want to just sort of correct a slip of the tongue there. So what we're seeing is we're seeing more students transfer from virtual learning to the in-person model. So since we announced the return to in-person, we do see a lot of students leaving in that direction. And for that reason, there are quite a few seats there in the VLA.
Oh, good. Thank you. Did I say the opposite?
Yep.
All right. Good catch. Thank you for catching that. So in the middle, so while we have some differences, in the middle we have some thoughts. One of them is, are there going to be subs for teachers who may get sick? Right now we have a lot of subs in our sub pool, and we are not at all worried about being able to cover our needs. That could change over time, and if it does, then we're going to need to continue to monitor our plans. But as it is right now, we anticipate that we have sufficient number of teachers to cover. What is the plan? Dr. Carter, I think we'll kick this one to you. What's the plan for kids in the flexible in-person learning who catch a cold? We can agree to keep sick kids home, but will they be able to virtually attend their classes?
Yeah, I just want to say that we have a solution for this, and the reason why we have a solution is because of the work of our reentry guidance team. I get calls from so many superintendents who are frustrated trying to figure things out. They're realizing that at the first of the year they should have started a virtual learning academy. They're realizing that you need this consistency for students who might be at home. But our reentry guidance team, they really had the forethought to design a system that is prepared for these eventualities. All of our Novato teachers from gauge K through 12 are going to maintain throughout the 2021 school year an online digital learning platform. For our older students, this is our Google Classroom. For our younger students, this is Seesaw. And so on those days when you keep your child home, you realize it's just a runny nose, but you're trying to stay safe, we absolutely will be able to plug you right into your school and your teachers and keep you on pace with your academics.
You're muted, Chris.
Oh. And you know what? Another thought that's popping up is some of our teachers are actually looking at, as this hybrid progresses, beginning to maybe teach in-person sessions. And so those afternoon sessions will start to become blended. And so the child is remoting in with their students. But, that's something that we're going to take our time exploring, but that may very soon be an option.
Okay, good. So another one of the different slides, what will the schedule be? And, I think everybody in elementary now knows what the schedule will be. Folks in middle school and high school don't necessarily know what that will be. And Amy, I know you don't know exactly what that will be, but you've had some great meetings of the reentry team that worked on the middle school schedule. Can you share with us what, as best you can, given what you know right now?
Yep. So our reentry guidance team, again, left us some great ideas that now that we're here, we're able to reference those back and use that as a starting place. We created a task force that had parents, students, teachers, administrators to really look at this problem now that it's here and start looking at solutions for hybrid for the middle school. There was a lot of thoughtful discussion. My favorite was our student boys who really acknowledged that they're missing campus and students, and that's sometimes hard for a middle schooler to admit. But it was really an exciting workshop. We do have two models. One is got a cohort coming in the morning and a cohort coming in the afternoon. And the other one looks a little bit more like elementary with 2 days on, a middle day remote, and 2 days off. So right now that's back at the school sites. We're letting our teachers really weigh in because this will really affect their daily lives. And so we're having that conversation now and hope to be able to put that forward out in the community probably sometime early next week.
And we're always torn with the challenge of getting some information out to the parents who need it as soon as possible, because I know being a parent of kids in school, the more time you have up front, the better off you're going to be with scheduling, but we also want to make sure that we get it right. So, that's a challenge that we're struggling with, but it sounds like hopefully middle of next week we can get something out to you.
Yep. My best guess for high school is it's going to look really similar. We've really had some incredible success with our schedule. In fact, if you looked up at the Press Democrat, you'd see an article about the failure rate that is really running wild right now for high school students. Some districts are reporting failure rates up to 4 times what they've seen in the past, and that is not happening in Novato. And a big reason for that, I think, is the really well thought out bell schedule, the supports that we have in place. We have students on campus that need that extra support. Our counselors are checking in on these kids, and our teachers are just doing an exceptional job, even in the strange, difficult environment, keeping those kids on track. So we feel like that is a schedule that we have a lot of success and a lot of pride in. And so we really are expecting that will be very similar in the spring.
All right, great. Thank you. Yancey, I think you have the easiest question of the virtual town hall. And that question is, how much of this is motivated by money? Losing students from the district and the revenue associated is tough. Losing lives is worse. The return now feels like one is valued over the other.
So, Chris, none in terms of how much of this is motivated by money. The adopted state budget for 2020-2021 fixed the funding level of all school districts throughout the state at their 2019-2020 level, no matter how many kids are back and when we bring them back. So there's no financial incentive to bringing back kids quicker or to be doing anything in terms of schedule. We are going to be funded at that 2019-2020 level, no matter what we do. Okay, great. So easy question. This is not a financial decision. This is an academic and social emotional decision. Side B, I like these people. I believe those in decision-making positions have made good decisions for our safety and for the development of our students. Their evidence is safe. Decisions affecting the future of our children should be made from science, not reactive emotions. And then I trust the administration to manage the COVID pandemic and reopening. They're working with the experts and stakeholders, a couple of them here on the call with us. It's important to let those closest to the decision manage these decisions. Obviously, a big disparity in our community about how folks feel about that. In the middle, we have a couple of topics. This one we've talked about a couple of times about the need for all of our, this is specifically high school, but all of our students to need more attention. We feel like we can provide that attention better, be a better early warning system when our kids are on campus. Amy, a question for you about sort of the cohorting of children at different schools, siblings. Our children are in the 2nd and 6th grades, and we need to have them attend on site the same days of the week. Both parents are working, and this is the only way we can continue working and educate our children. Can you talk about how our principals are working together on that?
Absolutely. So we can easily, through our computer systems, identify when there's a sibling tied to that cohort. Again, we'll see where the middle school lands on their final schedule, but if they do have the AA Wednesday remote BB schedule, those will absolutely be synced up to those students through siblings. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, and this is our last slide. This is about COVIDs and testing and a lot of different topics. So we'll start with the side A. Procedures. If there is a COVID case in a cohort, will the student need to have a negative test in order to return to the classroom after the 2-week quarantine? This is one we addressed earlier, and the answer is no. The 2-week quarantine is sufficient. I think we would encourage anybody who is in the cohort to go out and get a test.
but we will not mandate that they get a test and provide us with a negative test. What will a typical student schedule look like at the secondary level, and how many contacts will a typical student have in a day? Amy, you talked about the middle school schedule and some of the different possibilities and our efforts to reduce the number of contacts the student will have in a day. What about high school? About how many contacts or students in their cohorts that they'll interact with in a given day?
At the high school level, again, because they adopted this really innovative schedule that that is really working well for us, we were able to bring high school classroom sizes down to about 25. So high school students will be doing 2 classes a day. And so if you take that in half, they're looking at about 12 to 15 in each class for a total of 30 per day.
Okay, so estimate of about 30. Okay, good. Beside A, B common, that middle column there, we've talked about this one a couple of times. Again, one of our most important topics that we very much agree with. And then the other one, the bottom one there, we've talked about also our children in 2nd and 6th grade. This is the siblings at different schools and how do we do our best to get them on the same schedule. And then our last thought is do not create shortened school days. Virtually every industry has increased workload issues resulting from the pandemic, and this isn't unique to teachers, and it shouldn't be a reason to send students home early, keep full days for our students. Shortening school days prioritizes teachers over students. I want to say that I 100% believe that our teachers are working harder in this new environment than they ever have, regardless of the length of the school day. They've shown that from day one when we didn't miss a beat. Day one of our school closure, we switched to virtual learning in a world that they were absolutely not familiar with, and they've made themselves familiar with it. They've made themselves expert with it. They've worked extra days, nights, weekends to get themselves to the point where they are right now, and they're still working that hard. You know, I'm lucky enough to be married to a teacher who is transitioning back to her classroom today. Yancy is lucky enough to be married to a teacher who has transitioned back a few weeks ago back to her classroom. We both see all the extra time and energy that they're putting into their work, and it's the same for all of our NUSD teachers. So I want to say that whether the day is shorter or not, that doesn't mean that teachers are working harder, because we're asking so much more and new of them. But Amy, you want to talk a little bit about the schedules and shorter days and state mandates and all that stuff?
Yeah, and I do kind of want to bring it back to that first important point that we covered, just about the mental health concerns. You know, this is a really challenging environment for our staff and our students. And as we started preparing for the year ahead, our reentry guidance committee really kind of pointed us to that and said, you know, the fatigue of being on a screen can be challenging. The fatigue of being in a classroom with a mask when you're 8 years old and just want to wiggle around can be challenging. And so for that reason, we really started heading in that direction. This summer, SB 98 came out, and it gave us some instructional minutes that we're abiding by. And we do see those instructional minutes as really an appropriate marker for what can be done during this pandemic. You know, we really encourage parents and students and families after that Zoom time that can be really fatiguing, to make sure that your student gets outside, gets fresh air, gets to engage in physical activity and curiosity. You know, try to keep your child away from the television and the screens and let them get out there, because our concerns are with the mental health of our teachers, as Chris described, as they're doing something that they never trained for. But also the shortened day is something that we're looking at for the health and welfare of our students. We do have data that shows that our students are learning during this period. We're seeing that in our assessments, and we're seeing that in the early grading material. So we do feel like we're doing a good job striking that balance between what is needed, both emotionally and academically during this time.
Okay. With that, I take us to our last slide, which is a thank you. First of all, this wouldn't be possible without folks participating in the thought exchange. So to everybody who participated in either providing new thoughts or in ranking the thoughts or in all of the above, thank you for sharing your time and your expertise with us. And now I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we're going to take a look at some questions from the chat bar, whether that was on the YouTube channel or on the Facebook Live feed. So let's start with question number 1. Can elementary VLA students still expect daily synchronous instruction? Dr. Carter, you want to take that one?
Yes, so we are breaking apart the VLA schedule from the elementary and not asking our VLA teachers to cohort, because there really isn't a benefit. We're not trying to avoid contact. And so for that reason, our VLA teachers can keep their whole cohort together. Of course, they'll be doing small group interventions in the afternoon, but we are letting them, of course, use the best pedagogy that they can during this time, and that is to not necessarily split those cohorts.
Okay, good, thank you. And they'll still get daily synchronous instruction?
Yes.
Okay, great. Will VLA students be impacted when flexible in-person students return to campus? You kind of just addressed that, so it should look pretty similar for VLA when students return to campus.
Yep, and it's worth noting, you know, as you mentioned, Chris, that at the high school level, we do have teachers that have their foot in both worlds. And so they will be, the VLA students will track along with that schedule so that the teacher can have, you know, that interspersed within their day.
Okay, good. If my child is reluctant to be in the virtual learning academy or the in-person program, is there a third option?
I wish there was.
Yeah, you know, we're not a system that's built on having a menu, so to speak. You know, I think about where public education started when I was a kid, and I think about where we are now with all the specialized programs we have on our campuses to meet different unique needs. We've come a long ways, but our menu is short. You know, at this time we have a couple of different options on the menu, and one is flexible in person, and the other one is virtual learning academy. And the idea is that if you're not comfortable with your child being on campus, you have a fully remote option, which is the virtual learning academy. And I know that's a big decision. You know, we've allowed parents to say they want to be in it for the first semester, or they can be in it for the full year. We've allowed families to continue to transfer in and out of that program and continue to do so. But I know it's a hard decision, especially when you've been committed to a particular school and a school culture for a long time. We understand that it's difficult.
And Dr. Koska, I would mention that, you know, we do have a NOVA program. This is an at-home study program. When we see kids with high anxiety issues or maybe health issues, that's an appropriate placement. I really would be reluctant to put that forward as a preferred choice, just because we know students need that socialization, and we really feel like we're offering that through VLA or flexible in person. But if you fall in that category, by all means, reach out to your administrator and they can start walking you through the process.
And what grades does that program serve?
I know we do elementary on up to high school.
Okay. There was a question in the chat about how many contacts will teachers have. And so maybe we talk about middle school and high school contacts. I mean, elementary school. I think in elementary school, our TK to 3, we have 24 or less. In our 4th and 5th grades, we have 30 or less. Amy, do you want to talk a little bit about middle school and high school, what that could look like?
Yeah, so we're really trying to minimize those daily contacts. But over the course of a week, our instructors at the middle schools will see all of their students during that time. And their teacher load is between 130 to 150. Our high school students as well will see all of their students throughout the week, and they're looking at about 100 students. So, that is the intent. We want to get these students in the company of their beloved teachers, and so we're really looking to make sure that every child gets to see their teacher throughout that week.
Okay, good. Thank you. Amy, this is going to be one for you. Please explain how special education will work at the elementary level without mixing cohorts and having one-on-one interventions. This is a challenge. It's a challenge we're ready to take on and we need to take on. But how would you address that?
So they're really looking at a couple models. They can still offer a virtual model for any student with disabilities that would like to continue to maybe have their speech therapy remote, but they are coming up with solutions that pull tiny groups of students from their original cohorts into small groups where they can then support them academically. The other strategy besides the pull-out is also the push-in, where the special education support then goes into the classroom to support the child within their classroom environment.
Okay. Let's see. Yancey, this one's more for you. Will high school students switch classrooms during the day, and will the desks be cleaned in between transitions? My understanding is there's one transition at high school in a day. Do you guys know if the high schools are doing the double desk thing like some of the middle schools have talked about? Do we know about that?
Yeah, Dr. Koska, yeah, both of our high schools in many, if not all of their classrooms are using an A or B desk, or I know there's a green and gold over at San Marin, and so that at the high school level, two students won't sit in the same seats each day, but we can still keep socially distanced. But yeah, they will move classes, but in the high schools, I believe most of them will be sitting at different desks. We also provide disinfectant and wipes to wipe down the desks if that's not the case, and still even recommended again for those high touch areas. Okay, good, thank you. Here's the question that everybody wants the answer to, and nobody more than me. The question is, when will our high school students go back to being on campus 5 days a week? And I think the same question goes for elementary school and middle school. And what I can say is that we're dipping our toe in the water, and we started dipping our toe in the water today with our transition kindergartners, and our self-contained special day classes. And today was a big success, but it's just the first day. We want to continue to monitor how this goes through these first phases. We have a 5-phase reentry program just to get back to hybrid learning, with the next phase being November 9th. So, my belief is that during the month of December, after we've had an opportunity to watch and learn how the first 2 or 3 phases have gone, based on the numbers at the time in Marin County and in Novato, I will be making another recommendation to the board about what the next phases look like. The next phases would be potentially to be returning all of our students to campus, or expanding the amount of time that our kids are on campus, or something else, depending upon the data that's available to us and how things are going. So that's a question I wish I could give you the answer to right now. I wish I had the answer to that question right now. Let's see. There's a question about what do teachers do if they have a COVID positive student in one cohort? Do they quarantine and get a sub for the other cohort, or do both cohorts go virtual? I should know the answer to that question right off the top of my head. I do not. I think the teacher is in quarantine. I think we would most likely move both of the cohorts to virtual learning, with the potential concern that the teacher could have become infected and could then spread it to the other cohort. So our nurses, what are your thoughts on that one?
Sandra, now it's my time to tell you you're muted.
I know. It's impossible. If there's a positive case in a cohort, the teacher is part of that cohort and is quarantined along with the cohort, then it becomes sort of an internal school issue as to how to respond to that. Either there's a sub coming in to work with the remaining cohort, or the whole thing goes virtual. But that's really a kind of personnel issue. The only thing that we would weigh in on is that the teacher is home.
Okay, good. So that's a great question. It's a thought-provoking question for us to make sure we're working on knowing the right answer to it. So thank you for that hard question. One thing you're always going to hear from us when we know the answer, we're going to tell you the answer. We don't know the answer, we're going to tell you we don't know the answer. We're going to be transparent about that. So that was a good question. Let's see. We're going to do this last question and then we're going to wrap it up. What about students who are receiving strategies in other regular classrooms and then they move to VLA? So how do we handle that transition, Amy, when you've got a kid that's been in a classroom, they've been in the classroom for the first couple months of the year, and now they're moving into VLA? I think one of the benefits that Novato has is that we've got some pretty tight alignment across our schools and across our systems. We've got one of our elementary principals co-running our elementary VLA, and we have somebody who's been working in curriculum instruction co-running the secondary VLA. I'm sure that's very helpful.
Yep, and again, going back to the fact that we have Google Classroom that's sort of housing all of that students' work. We have Seesaw as well. Then that is going to be a transition where that work goes over to the new teacher. And to Chris's point, we're really looking at essential standards and the mastery that each student is showing on those essential standards. And we always have data on their progress towards that, and that is passed off to the new teacher. It can be abrupt, but we make sure that that's as smooth as possible so that the student is able to just pick up right where they left off. I do know our grade level teams are working closely together to try to keep the curriculum and pacing as much in line as we possibly can so that there isn't new material or already taught material that student's going to see in that transition. Mm-hmm.
Great. To all of our teachers, getting a new student into their classroom is not a new thing. They are very skilled at embracing new children that enter into their classrooms, making sure that they do everything they can to smooth off that transition, which can be challenging. But I have great faith in our educators to make sure that transition happens and happens well. So with that, I want to thank our guests. Sandra and Marcia, thank you so much for spending some time with us this afternoon and giving us generously of your time in the evening where you would probably much rather be with your family, but appreciate you spending that time with us here and sharing your expertise with us. Thank you to the rest of my team who happened in front of the scenes, Yancey Hawkins and Amy Carter, and also all those behind the scenes that helped to make all the logistics work of the YouTube channel and the Facebook Live and helping me get the questions from the chat. Thank you all very much. And to everybody, I wish you a great night. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.